Hey.
Nice to meet you officially.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to be in Nashville.
Yeah.
So let me tell you a little bit about myself and
Yeah.
kind of what we're doing and kick the conversation off. But my name's Marc Hedrick. I'm a craniofacial surgeon.
Boy, do I need one of those.
Well, I don't know. You don't want me operating on you. It's been 20 years. It's not like riding a bike or figure skating. But so I used to mostly operate on kids that have cleft lips and palates or other kind of more significant deformities. Now we're really trying to make a big difference in the care of GBM patients. But I kind of joke around that if I operate around the brain, if I was in the brain, it was a problem. And I had to call a neurosurgeon to come get me out of that. But I did that for a while. I was at UCLA and always doing research along the way. And I had probably 30 years of developing novel therapies for not only kids and adults, but also fetuses. So operating on babies before they were born to try to correct it so they don't die after birth.
Yeah.
And some of those treatments are now fairly common, actually. So, and I'm not an oncology guy. I haven't really been in the cancer space. I used to take care of patients with breast cancer and so forth, but about 2019, our company had sold its other technology. We're looking for, what's next, focused on cancer. Huge needs there, obviously. And we thought that targeted radiotherapeutics was going to have an enormous upside over the next 10 or 20 years, just at the very kind of early stages. Radiation's been out there for 100 years, but it hasn't been targeted. It's a beam and it's...
Yeah, it just keeps going until it runs out of energy.
Exactly. And it's wide and you need multiple treatments.
It's called collateral damage.
Collateral damage,
yes.
Exactly. So we kind of had the idea, and this sounds super simple, but cancers of the brain, spinal cord, the central nervous system are very radiosensitive. Proton therapy, radiation's commonly used. The problem is you can't get enough radiation there and the collateral damage. So we felt like if we could find a way to take radiation but really super target it just to the tumor, or what we call the region of interest, because that's very important.
I love that, region of interest.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sings to me in so many ways.
So I'd love to hear why, but for me... so it's particularly important with glioblastoma because when you scan a patient, you can see the tumor on the MRI. And you can actually take out the entire tumor, but it comes back.
However, you can't get the trace.
You can't get the trace.
Yeah, and that's been the problem is you can get the big nasty boy out of there, but it's going to come back. It's going to come back. Yeah, and it's, I've got into cancer fundraising. Like you're on the treatment side. I'm on the, I'm trying to be fuel for the machine, right? To keep that thing going, keep the lights on. And my mom came home very cheerfully one day with a cancer diagnosis. She said, "Hey, everybody, family meeting." And it's like, what's that? We never had a family meeting before. Oh my gosh. And she just said, "Hey, I just come to the doctor and I have cancer." And I was like, why is she excited? And years later you realize, you process all of that, and it's like she just didn't want us to be scared. And she wanted us to step into it, with her with enthusiasm, and that's just the way she thought. Wow. She was an amazing woman.
Wow, that's amazing.
There was no treatment for her. And so for 2 years, they threw everything in the kitchen sink at her, and she suffered and she diminished, and she finally succumbed. And on the morning she passed, I just had to figure out how to put my big boy pants on and just live life without her. But I didn't want to because I loved her so much. And so at that moment, I kind of grew up a little bit to take ownership of my skating career. And I also decided to become a fundraiser for cancer research. I didn't want anything to go into the administrative side or any I just wanted to go into research. Because I figured, there's a lot of people doing a lot of things. I just wanted to elevate the science so that maybe someday, if we could figure out a way to treat her cancer, I would know why I was born in the first place. So,
how old were you when?
I was 18.
Wow.
And I met so many people. It's funny how that talking point comes up. And somebody goes, wow, I lost my mom when I was 18 too. Wow, I lost my mom when I was 18 too. And you know,
it's before you get married, before you have kids, and it's just
18 is too young to lose your mom.
Yeah.
You need a mom at 18.
Yeah.
And so I made a lot of knucklehead mistakes, and I was just flying blind. But I was fundraising for cancer research. And then it was 2 months shy of the 20th anniversary of losing her that I was in a doctor's office. I was on tour with Stars on Ice, and the doctor said, we found a mass. I was like, really? I've never heard the word mass in description of me before, so it was kind of like a moment.
You were having symptoms? Or
yeah, I couldn't stand up straight, which is bad for a skater, you know. Yeah, and so I thought it was an ulcer.
Yeah.
And I fought it as long as I could. Finally, it was just, this is bad. And so he said, I don't know what it is. It's either benign, malignant, or something else. And it was in that moment I realized I was being diagnosed with the same basic illness that killed my mom. And the fear was unbelievable. And then it flipped into the sense of authority and power and courage and like, let's go do this. Let's go to war.
Right.
And I knew I was coachable.
Yeah.
You know, because I did pretty well on the competitive side eventually.
Yeah.
And then I said, I'm going to be their best patient ever. And I went into the Cleveland Clinic, and they treated me. They told me I had an 80-90% chance of survival, which I think my mom, they didn't give her that. They only gave her months to live. So I said, well, that's good. You know, and it was because 2 research scientists in Indiana figured out a cocktail to treat my particular cancer, and it was 3 chemo drugs that hit it. And within 4 rounds of it was my chemo was 2 chemo bags. Each was about a 4-hour infusion, and then I'd have a little shot that was a slow push shot of bleomycin antibiotic, and that was supposed to be the topper, but that had lung implications, and a lot of it had long-term effects of the chemotherapy. And so
you can get super sick with chemo. Did you tolerate it okay?
Only the bleo. The bleo was the only thing. The bleomycin was the only thing. Bleo Fridays were my nemesis.
Knocked you down.
And I knew that within like 90 minutes to the second after I got the shot, I would start getting like feverish and everything, and I'd just lay down and try to sleep it off. But the other drugs, I mean, my hair fell out, but it was happening anyway. And then there were a lot of, that I figured, okay, as long as I don't allow myself to get sick, like, stick, then I think I can figure out a way to tolerate this thing and just sort of make it sort of my lifestyle for the next few months. And so
with your athletic background, you're probably super competitive, right? So
yeah.
Like, hey, just
plus
I'm gonna
for whatever I was taking for granted in my life, as a touring figger skater, I desperately wanted it back.
Yeah.
So that was my carrot. I was gonna tell me what to do, and I'll do it because I want to be back on tour next year.
Yeah.
And and then I had a 38 staple surgery, which I affectionately called Paleo Scott. And then, so everything was different. My physicality was different.
Right.
My body, I had a seam now in my core.
Yeah.
And a lot of things were different, but I was very determined to get back to skating. And so in that, I was able to raise some money for the Cleveland Clinic as a thank you. And I said, I don't want this to end here because I'd taken so many notes during my treatment. Okay, one, they said, you're having chemotherapy. And I said, how sick am I going to be? And you're a physician, right? The answer to my question was moderate to severe. And I said, what does that mean? And he said, moderate to severe. It's like, okay, I need somebody that's been there, done that, to mentor me through this thing. So
that's such a doctor thing to say, by the way.
Well, I mean,
because you don't want to be definitive about it because you don't know. You may do great for chemo. You may really put you down. So
and he was. I mean, my oncologist was one of the greatest people I've ever known, and he's still on the board of my foundation. So I mean, the greatest of the great. And so that was like a note to self moment. And then the other one was I went on Dr. Google because everybody goes on Dr. Google, right? So I go on Dr. Google. And all I could find for my testicular cancer were medical journal papers, right? Lay summaries, as they call them. I don't know why I call them lay summaries because there's no layman that can read them. You have to be in the biz. So there were 12-syllable words, in these documents. And I thought, I'm too dumb to be sick. Note to self. So when we created this this platform because we really wanted it to be multifaceted. It was called CARES. It's the Cancer Alliance because we wanted to grow as many people to be involved in this as possible for research, education, and survivorship. So we're announcing CARES, and at the press conference, I look at my urologist, and I go, what do you think of Fourth Angel? And he said, kind of cool. What does it mean? I go, well, when you're diagnosed with cancer, your first angel is your oncologist. Your second angel is your oncology nurse, right? Or you can flip those if you want. Your third angel is your friends and family. What was missing was the fourth angel. And the fourth angel is somebody who's been there, done that can walk you through and give you cheat codes, life, and be a role model that I want to be where you are. I want to be well, and I want to be past this. Because when you're the only one going through cancer, and you're isolated, and you're kind of away from your normal life, and you're not feeling well, and you've watch your hair fall out, and you watch every hair in your body fall out, and then you get bloated from all the hydration, and then you just feel weak, and I couldn't even touch my toes, and I'm an athlete. I was like, ooh. So I just paid attention, and so after we created the Fourth Angel Mentoring Program, where we pair newly diagnosed patients with survivors, it's thriving, by the way. We came up with another idea, and this was Dr. Bukowski's idea, of creating a website where people could learn everything they wanted to know about chemo, all the drugs, how they work, and how to manage the side effects in 8th grade English. So I was the organ grinder's monkey for 5 years. And I did that, and we built it's called chemocare.com. And it's really a miraculous site.
You have medical experts that help you translate that.
It's all peer-reviewed. Everything is done. So it's how it's administered. Every single drug is listed, what they do, what they're designed to do, how they work, blah, blah, blah. And here are the side effects associated with it. You go, and then you can learn how to manage your side effects. And then it's like, oh, no more Dr. Google.
That's fantastic. I mean, think about how the healthcare system's changed in the last 20 years. It's become, it's a lot more transactional. You're in and out, you're seeing multiple different doctors, you're moving around. So the system is more difficult to navigate on that end. On the other hand, the technology's exploded. So you need really somebody to steward you through that whole process. And it's a great idea.
It's the way that it's grown. Obviously,
the need's enormous.
Well, and again, when people see the benefit of it, they just can't wait, right? So we thought if we did 3 million hits a year on chemocare.com, we were doing our job, and we were doing over 3 million hits a month. And it just kept growing and growing because when I was diagnosed with a brain tumor 7 years after my cancer, they handed me a sheet of paper with my brain tumor and the information on it with chemocare.com. Like a letterhead. It was like,
they didn't connect the dots.
It's like, and here we are, right back at square one. But it's just that whole adventure. And so then we did that for 15 years, and we established it at the Cleveland Clinic, and it's doing a great job. And I just wanted to grow, and I wanted to grow as a research foundation.
It's tough to scale there. Tough to scale in academia. And
when you're in a healthcare facility, there are certain rules on where you can raise money and where you can't. And so I just wanted, I didn't care where I got money. It's like Danny Thomas had this really cool quote that said, I'd rather get $1 from 1 million people than $1 million from one person. And I'm not that picky. But I didn't want there to be any limitations or any barriers because it's a big problem that affects everyone. Why not get out into the community as a dedicated foundation and then grow something that can really...
When did you take it out of sort of the Cleveland Clinic umbrella?
We've been a foundation for almost 10 years.
Wow.
And so we're almost 15 years there, so I guess we're 8 or 9 now here.
And you're investing in research too, so research can be all over the map, right? So,
it can be all over the map, so you got to be really strategic because when we put our stake in the ground, it was for immunotherapy, targeted therapies, the awareness approach on therapy. It was basically treat the cancer and spare the patient, right? So that's why our ribbon is upside down. So we want to turn cancer upside down. We want to turn it from being fear and just all this anxiety and all this trepidation and everything to being like, oh, I have cancer, I'll be fine. That's where we wanted to get to. And we realized that it's not naive to say that our bodies created the cancer, that our bodies should be able to destroy it. And so we just felt like in the initial phases of launching as a rededicated research foundation that we're just going to go all in on the promise of immunotherapy. And we launched 3 years before the first drug came out.
Really?
Yeah. It's kind of like...
Wait, it takes 10 years to develop a drug.
No, it was being in development, but we just saw it as the promise. But nothing had been proven yet. You know, even though there was a lot of people working on it, and a lot of people saw the promise of it, we just felt like coming up with another chemotherapy drug, even though I'm here 27 years later because of chemotherapy, I didn't want to be a part of that. I wanted to be a part of the promise of the future and how it all works.
You saw chemotherapy drugs work, but they're incredibly debilitating to the patient. And there are better ways to do it. Immuno-oncology therapies, targeted radiotherapy.
Treat the cancer, spare the patient.
Exactly.
And so much of what was just accepted as kind of status quo, well, unfortunately, that's the way we have to do things, was we're just going to hit it with everything we've got, and maybe the healthy stuff will grow back.
Right, yeah.
It's kind of that. So I want to know more about you, because in our adventure, like, of course, we went after metastatic melanoma. Breast cancer was what my mom died of. And we funded a study that went into clinical trial in February, and it's really exciting that, wow, after all these years, maybe something will work for her. But we also had a gentleman knock on our door, and I'll tell you that story later, but the whole glioblastoma multiforme world it's really tough. Because one doctor that we're very involved in, he's a brain surgeon, he said, I'm tired of telling the same story after 40 years. And we need to elevate the science. We need to create more treatment options and understand the disease better. And that's where we started this conversation. But I want to talk about sort of the EVRT and then all the other things, however you want to say, all those things that you're working on, because I think in that there's a lot of people out there, like we've learned through our research, that it's not genetically passed along, right? Which is great news for the families, right? But beyond that, it's like, how can we better look after this particular cancer that right now has very little hope, if any, to create new pathways for treatment and hopefully one day recovery?
These patients need hope. It's been there's been one drug approved in the last decade or so for recurrent glioblastoma.
It's hard to study.
It's hard to
research because people don't.
It's pretty rare. It's 15,000 patients in the U.S. There are a lot of clinical trials that are going on, but there have been really no winners. It is very difficult. On one hand, I know this is a tough thing to say, but it's very difficult to develop drugs to treat it, because it's really an insidious disease, how it sort of infiltrates not only where the tumor you can see, but kind of around that area. And so a lot of clinical trials have failed, but I think what we're doing should provide people with hope. And it's not just for recurrent glioblastoma, which is where our clinical trial is today, but it's also for patients when they're potentially newly diagnosed, or other kinds of brain cancers. Kids have brain cancer too. It's even rarer, but it's even, believe it or not, it's probably even a poorer prognosis. And then there's a tremendous amount of patients that have breast cancer, lung cancer, that have metastases to the brain. I mean, much higher number of patients.
My particular cancer had metastases.
Very difficult to treat. And what we're doing could be a solution for that. And a way to think about it is when a new technology gets developed, usually that it gets developed very quickly, and patients, in the case of medicine, patients do better and better, but then it kind of runs its course and you just can't make it work any better. The doctors have figured out how to best apply the tool, and the tool has kind of lost its incremental impact going forward. So we think we're on the cusp of, we're still early, but having a new way to improve radiation delivery to the brain.
This is at Plus Therapeutics, right?
This is at Plus Therapeutics. I'm the CEO of Plus Therapeutics. And so I'll tell you about the technology in a minute, but what we're trying to do is take what is a lethal diagnosis, malignant GBM or glioblastoma, and turn it into a chronic disease. There's so many cancers right now that were death sentences before, and now with many of the things that you're talking about, or maybe that you're funding, are now chronic diseases. Melanoma actually is very treatable now. Breast cancer, very treatable now. And that's through better diagnosis, better treatment, better education for patients, more holistic care. So that's our goal. It's kind of crazy, I think, to say, hey, we're going to cure brain cancer. That's a pretty tall order.
Not
But
really.
if we could turn it, if you could
Somebody's got to do it. Why not you?
You got to take the first step.
Yeah.
And the first step is let's turn it into a chronic disease.
Yeah.
And so we'll, if we can make it chronic enough, maybe something else will get you. And I mean, that notion is revolutionary.
Well, it's kind of like what prostate cancer has begun. It's like all men, if we live long enough, will develop prostate cancer.
Yeah.
It's just in what form and when it's all the early detection stuff and how do you treat it. But a lot of it can be slow growing, like thyroid cancer can be slow growing, and you can live with it. But this one is very aggressive.
GBM is very aggressive, and so there's some reasons why I think are important to talk about, because I'm going to talk about the solutions for these in a minute. But what makes GBM so aggressive and so difficult? It's a handful of things. First of all, anything that's in the brain is protected by something called the blood-brain barrier. It's a defensive mechanism that we all have, and it's to keep toxic things out of our brain, to protect our brain and spinal cord. Well, that's great, but it also keeps drugs from getting in there. So a lot of drugs that might be very good theoretically for treating brain cancer, they just can't get past the blood-brain barrier. So what we do, that I'll mention in a moment, gets drugs beyond the blood-brain barrier, takes that out of the equation. That's a fundamental problem in development. The second thing is the anatomy. I mean, it's the real estate, it's high-dollar real estate up there.
Yeah.
And so
it's like give me cancer twice, but not there.
Not there, right. And everything's important. There's nothing that's not important up there. You can lose half your liver and be okay. You can lose one kidney and be okay, but not so much up here. So to your point about precision and taking care, treating the tumor, but helping the patient or not hurting the patient, making something that's super targeted to just the tumor. And it's important really with GBM to talk about another kind of concept, and that's region of interest. And you see a tumor on an MRI, and okay, it's white, the rest of it's black, there's my tumor. But GBM is infiltrative. It sends out little nests of cells. And the surgeon could come out of the OR and say, hey, I got all your tumor. Great. Well, it's going to be back in 4 to 6 months because there are these
trace.
And so the region of interest is not just the tumor, it's an extension around that. It's like a penumbra.
You can get that's the secret sauce.
That's the ticket, and we have a way to do that. So we treat conceptually not just the tumor, but the region of interest. Now, external beam radiation tries to do that, but the problem is you just can't get enough radiation to the tumor. If you really dial up the radiation, you get significant complications around the brain and skull.
Because that's healthy tissue.
It's healthy tissue.
Yeah. And so it's treat against patient harm. It's hard to do that with radiation, the traditional radiation being photon or X-ray beam, right? And so there's going to be energy exposed to healthy tissue that will disrupt it. Right. So tell me about this.
Yeah, so quickly how it works. So and it's a complicated treatment scheme, and I'll explain it at a high level, but we have a drug that's encapsulated form of rhenium. Rhenium's actually used in airplane blades. It's a super highly tolerant rare metal. We don't take rhenium, we take something else, and we turn it into an isotope of rhenium by putting it in a nuclear reactor for a period of time. So it picks up that extra energy, it's in the rhenium, then we load that into lipid molecules, and then we put catheters in and around the tumor, and there's incredibly cool imaging and case planning technology and delivery technology in terms of catheters that allow us to essentially, it sounds a little crude, but you've heard of fracking in the oil and gas industry, but you push fluid through the ground, it breaks up the shale deposits and frees up the gas. So we actually push the drug under pressure, not a lot of pressure, a little pressure, and it moves according to very complicated physics. And then we shut off the pressure, it quits moving. So we can plan very precisely around the region of interest, put catheters strategically in very precise ways. And if anybody that's had a brain cancer has had a brain biopsy, because you got to see what it is. These are big decisions, exactly. But that's an easy procedure.
Yeah.
That's an easy, straightforward procedure. This is just like a brain biopsy, except you put maybe up to 5 catheters in. You leave them in there for 24, 48 hours. You deliver the drug. We actually can watch the drug going in because the type of radiation it is. And the reason we use rhenium is it's the ideal radioisotope for central nervous system cancers. It has a lot of complicated physics to get there, but just trust me on this. It's the ideal radioisotope, but it has a cancer-killing part of its energy, and it has a visualization part. So think about it. I take an aspirin.
So you see it work.
You see it. You take an aspirin. You don't know where your aspirin went.
Yeah.
You can't see it. We can put patients under a scanner, and we can watch the drug go through the catheters into the tumor and accumulate.
So it's almost like a PET scan.
It's like a PET scan tracer. Yeah. People know what that is. It's a radioactive dye that you can follow anywhere in the body. So it's the same exact concept, but it's also killing and visualizing at the same time. So we can see where it's going at any one time, which is a critical feature for us to be able to develop this very quickly, because every patient we learn something from. Yeah. The other thing is, after the fact, maybe a week after the treatment, we can tell exactly how much radiation was delivered to the tumor. Now, the radiation oncologists, when you get external beam radiation, they plan that up front. We can do it after the fact by what the SPECT scans that we do, like PET scans. We can measure how much radiation got to the tumor. So I know what the radiation dose is. So when I say we've been able to develop this relatively quickly, it's because we can now, and there's a very high statistical correlation in our trial, which is funded by the National Cancer Institute through phase 2. Very high statistical correlation between how much radiation got to the tumor and how long the patient lived. So, I mean, it sounds intuitive, but to prove that,
less cancer, more life,
more radiation, less tumor, no complications, no systemic toxicity, by the way.
Wow.
So this is
That's
to
huge.
your other point.
Yeah.
So external beam radiation is limited by the amount you can give them because you can't have those complications. We give 10 to 20 times the amount of radiation of external beam, but no systemic toxicity, because it's right to the region of interest, and then we turn the pressure off and
I always tell people, the lay people, it's like the difference between a hand grenade and a sniper.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. You want a sniper. You only want to really get rid of the bad guy. You don't want to hurt a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we see cancer treatment going, and we're just trying to fuel that over time, because we see GBM from a completely personal point of view. So many people, I've just done over the years. And it's hard to watch. One gentleman came to us and he just said, I had my first resection and I want to raise money for research. And his name was Scott Williams. And it's like, well, how do you want to raise money? And he said, I want to ride the Natchez Trace on a bicycle for 444 miles with brain cancer. And I was like, okay, we'll call you right back. So we reached out to our cycling guy, right? And we said, is this a thing? And he just had back surgery where he put a couple artificial discs in, so he wasn't even on his bike. And he said, he'll never make it without me. And it was the most beautiful, inspiring, kind of human interest thing to watch this gentleman that's battling GBM, and with everything he's got, and he's trying to create hope for an entire community of people living with GBM and their families, that we're actually doing something about this. We're just not like going to roll over and watch this thing happen. So in 9 days, he rode the length of the Natchez Trace, and he hit every obstacle you could possibly do it, and he made it to the finish line. So I said, I'm doing it next year. I was so inspired. And so I did it the next year. And what was really phenomenal about that ride was A, I'm not a cyclist. B, my rear end will never be the same, okay? But it was on day 3, I didn't think I was going to make it past day 2, because I'm not a cyclist, and I couldn't even move my legs.
Did you train for it, or you just?
I did, but not like
to the degree you
averaging 90 miles a day for 5 straight days. But Johnny was really great at getting me through, and the 3rd day he goes, I'm going to help you transition all the lactic acid out of your legs so you can ride. And at some point today, you're going to say, we're going 100 miles. It's like, I know my body, and I know that's not going to happen. And he goes, do you trust me? And I go, And so we did this thing, and after mile 5, I felt my legs completely release. And for the next 90 minutes, we averaged 24 miles an hour. We flew.
Oh, wow.
We flew. And then at the 70-mile mark, I go, let's go 100. And he goes, I told you so. But what was really wild, and I don't know, this story's so much pertinent to our conversation, but it's one of those things where we got to the 100-mile marker, and I got in the van to go to the hotel, and all I felt in my spirit was go back. And so I didn't know what that meant. And so I bring out my phone, I went back year after year, and it's like, I ended up going back 25 years. 25 years. And I looked at the date, and then I went back to date of diagnosis, first round of chemo, second round of chemo, third round of chemo. And it was on that date, 25 years before, that I wanted to quit chemo. Because I was so sick, right? Yeah. And so I recorded a video just basically saying, if you're in an infusion chair right now, just know there's a mile marker waiting for you.
Don't quit.
You just got to keep going. And I learned so much, and Scott was so inspiring. And we went into year 3, and we changed the ride to be more inclusive. And he was there with his wife, Ellie, to give out medals at the finish line for everybody participating. And then last October, he succumbed. And it's such a kick in the stomach when you try everything you possibly can to partner with somebody to save or extend their lives, and you don't win the fight. And knowing that this work is being done it's so inspiring, and it honors Scott's legacy. You know, that he fought it with everything he had, and he did something unthinkable in his condition to create hope for other people.
That's incredible.
But you're doing the work.
Yeah, it's an incredible story.
So where do you see this going?
Yeah, so I think you have to, with anything like this, you've got to have data. You've got to collect the data. And you know, we're blessed to work with great cancer centers. We're just adding Ohio State is going to be
James, that's where my mom was treated.
Oh, really? Yeah, they're coming on. They're going to be one of our GBM treatment sites.
Great.
So plus a site in New York and in Florida. So we want to get the phase 2 trial done first, and if it confirms what we learned in the phase 1 or what we saw in the early part of the phase 2 data, it's somewhere between maybe a 60 to 100% improvement in overall survival. Wow! And this is just, as I mentioned before, we're just sort of learning what this can do. But we want to go as fast as we can, which takes money, which you know something about, and raising it. And we're doing it as a company, but we're kind of building the team of experts, the data set, NIH support, working with major cancer centers, getting the phase 2 done. And if that's confirmed, we'll go into an approval trial, which will be a much bigger trial with bigger sites. And that's maybe about a 2-year trial. So the goal is to be in that next year. And we're also expanding. We just got a grant actually from the Department of Defense, $3 million, to study this now in pediatric brain cancer.
Wow.
So smaller group of kids or patients, but the need's even bigger there. And we're working with Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago, sort of our core site. We're adapting the adult technology to kids.
Great.
And their tumors. And so we just had a great discussion with the FDA on that. So I hope that'll get up and running this year. And then that'll expand to more than one site. And that's for high-grade glioma, which is sort of similar to GBM, but for kids. And then something called ependymoma, which is it's a rare pediatric brain tumor. It's very radiosensitive, but it's like GBM. It's really hard to eradicate. Very hard to eradicate.
And you know, over the years, you know, just with a lot of work, Stars and Ice used to fundraise for Target House at St. Jude, and the families there, and just meeting the kids, and you know, they've done everything they can to advance science, you know, for young people, especially, and survival rates. They've helped a lot in that. But seeing initially how those children were treated, you know, because the best they had was just radiation. And so you radiate a child enough to get rid of the cancer, and there's no child left.
The brain's growing and developing, and the radiation's not good for that.
It's the worst. And so
it's horrible.
You see these children valiantly fight this thing, and families bravely fighting it. And if they're able to get to a point where they're cancer free, their quality of life is zero.
Yeah, right.
So it's really inspiring for me to hear about new technologies, new treatments, new pathways to be able to treat something that we all deserve a full life, whether we get it or not. In many respects depends on many factors. And getting the care we need is number one. Like we were talking before we got on here about second opinions, and you're a big proponent of second opinions. And
Absolutely.
I told you I don't believe in second opinions. I believe in seventh opinions. So it's cancer's changing every day.
Yeah.
And where you stand in your battle, in many respects, depends on where you're sitting at the time, right?
Right.
And knowing just awareness of this development in GBM, I think was going to create a lot of hope and awareness. Because if they don't know about you and what you're doing, there's no chance in the world to be connected with this opportunity.
Yeah, exactly.
And so these conversations are really wonderful to have.
Yeah, it's an exciting time. If you look, the nation's top cancer centers publish guidelines on kind of what's the standard of care for treatment.
Standard of care is...
But standard of care for recurrent glioblastoma is get in a clinical trial, because this existing standard of care is not very good.
Well, I always go back do you remember how George Washington died?
No.
He had an infection, and the only treatment they had was bloodletting.
Okay.
And he died of blood loss.
Yeah.
So that was the best they had back then.
Yeah.
We don't really need to worry about what's the best we have right now as far as managed care.
Yeah.
We're going beyond that now.
So many cancers have been transformed in their management in the last 20 years. GBM and some of these CNS cancers have really not. And so it's going to take substantial leaps to make a difference. And I think what we're doing has the potential to be one of those substantial leaps. And if it works for recurrent glioblastoma, it should work in the primary setting when one's first diagnosed. It might be able to supplant surgery, because it eradicates. The reason you do surgery is to take the tumor out.
Yeah.
Well, the radiation's taking the tumor out. But if it's taking the tumor out and it's treating that zone around it where all the recurrences come from, which is the plan, we're trying to perfect that, then it might be useful, across the board in the whole GBM spectrum, and then pediatric brain cancer, and then like your mom that had breast cancer, that not oftentimes will metastasize to the brain. Yeah. Treatment for that's radiation or surgery. This should work for those, and that's a tremendously larger group of patients that need something like this.
So, in any case like this, you've got an emerging option. There's a lot of science behind it. There's a lot of proof of concept behind it. What can people do to help you get this across the finish line in a big way?
I think the main thing that we need right now, although money's good, ultimately we need money, but it's not so much the money. We need patients trusting us, going to the doctor and seeing if they're fit the inclusion criteria for the trial, see if they're a candidate. They can call us. They can go to our website. The trial that we're doing for GBM is called RESPECT. Rhenium is the isotope, so it's RESPECT GBM. So look up RESPECT GBM, go to our website, Plus Therapeutics, and see if you have a loved one with GBM, and see if you're a candidate. That really helps us get these trials enrolled quickly.
That's great.
There are a lot of competing trials. We think this is the most exciting one that's out there right now, particularly for recurrent patients.
It's so innovative.
It's incredibly innovative, and we've got really big companies that are behind this. The imaging technology behind this, the software, and ultimately to be AI-based software to enable the ideal planning for this, but there are companies that are rushing in with these sort of ancillary technologies. They just needed this drug, and we supply the drug, and then we bring all these other technologies to bear. So, if you have a loved one with GBM or a friend, we'd love to see if you could be a candidate for the trial. That's the main way people can help us right now. We also just I'll say that just following us and sending out the links and all that just helps get the word out.
Well, according to Scott Williams, the GBM community is highly connected.
Yeah.
There's ways of connecting through social media, through his whole Facebook network was unbelievable. Every mile that we rode on the Natchez Trace, every mile was dedicated to somebody going through it, or somebody helping with the solution to this problem. And it's when you pray for somebody, 444 different names, over 444 different miles, it's like, wow, this problem it's impacting people. And I know 47 years later what the loss of my mom, has meant to me over the years, and how the best thing to do is be a part of the solution, right? The best thing. And so I'm really excited that, we didn't ask for GBM. It came knocking on our door. Nobody asked for cancer. It comes to you. You don't go to it, right? Who'd want to do that? But what I found is that in so many ways, cancer is not a sentient being. Because if it were, it would pick its battles differently. Because a lot of the battles that it picks are people that are truly going to fight back and give hope to the next patient and get behind new, innovative ways of looking at this disease and finding better ways of treating it, finally successfully. And that's what I hope for you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
One of my oldest, dearest friends, there's a car dealer in Fort Wayne, and he called me up, and he goes, hey, he goes, Jay told me to call you. I go, what's up? And he goes, I just got diagnosed with glio. And it's like, you did? And he goes, yeah. And I go, when? He goes, just now. I haven't told my family yet.
Oh, my gosh.
And he goes, but I'm super positive. I'm super excited about this journey, and I'm going to hit it with everything I've got. And to watch what he went through was just unbelievable. And he just never lost his enthusiasm, ever. And there was nothing he could do. Nothing he could do. Nothing he could do. And it was just wake up, his wife would wake up in the middle of the night and he'd be having a seizure in the bed next to her, and then all the stuff that happens. You know? It's awful.
It's kind of my surrogate, my wife's surrogate dad has end-stage gastric cancer. And it's kind of his pancreas and liver. And that's why I was just in Dallas. I came here from Dallas. So it's a big Lebanese family with all sorts of,
it's the grape
cousins.
leaves.
And, he's still eating grape leaves. I think they're kind of hoping that'll turn it around, but it hadn't. But I've been kind of I've been going with him as appointments to MD Anderson and UT Southwestern in Dallas, and I redid all his medications yesterday. But that's the first time I've really kind of walked with somebody from before his diagnosis. When he told me his symptoms, I said, uh-oh. And then he's probably a couple of weeks away from passing. And just to kind of sit with him and help, give him his pain medication. And that's the first time I've really been that close to the whole process with somebody. You don't get that as a doctor. You kind of pop in and pop out, and you own it, but you can always walk out and, hey, that's not me, or that's not my family. I don't have to go home with them.
When it is.
And I mean, very different than yours. I mean, just one of the funnest things I've done in the last year is go run a 5K with one of my patients. And but you see so you're running, and as a CEO of a company that does this, you think, okay, well, you're making a drug and you're going to fix the patient. What you don't really understand, but I think I do better now, is when you're out there running, you see their whole families, and they all have T-shirts on. So you just see how it just shows the ripple effect of that diagnosis. It's not just the patient. It's this whole ripple effect.
And then it goes generationally.
Yeah,
my kids will never meet their grandmother.
Yeah.
They can only hear stories about her.
Yeah.
And it's unfair because, you know, there's nothing better than being a grandparent, you know? And my mom got to have one grandchild before she passed. And it was for a minute. And at least that, right? There were, you know, 4 generations. Her mom, my sister, and her baby. And they were just, and it was amazing. But it's just, it's, you know, you look at life as, you know, there was a fundraiser I did in New Jersey. I'll never forget it. It was this guy who played football at Notre Dame, right? And he found out that he had this incurable cancer. And he goes, "Can you slow it down?" And they said, "Yeah, we could slow it down." He goes, "I'm not going to try to survive this thing if there's no proven treatment. Just slow it down. How much time can you give me?" They said, "We can give you about 18 months, maybe 2 years." He lived 5 years. And in those 5 years, he lived his life like he never would have without the cancer diagnosis. So he was grateful to it to his last breath. He was grateful for the cancer diagnosis because it forced him to live. And the name of the fundraiser is called Buying Time. And it forced me into a situation of thinking, like, that's all we care about. And they give you an hourglass. Right? And so in that, all we really want, because nobody gets out of this thing alive, right? All we really want is more sand.
So I told you we moved to Virginia. So we live, it's 55 acres.
Wow,
and
nice.
So there's a house in the middle and then there's pasture. We have a tenant farmer that runs cattle and sheep on that. So she calls one day and says, "Hey, I've got a friend who has a few exotic pets. One of them is a giant tortoise." And I'm thinking you might be interested in having a giant tortoise. Like, I'm not a reptile guy, you know, so I'm not that interested. And then she's dying of glioblastoma. And she's a Charlottesville, I think she was a policewoman from the Charlottesville Police Department. So she told me the story. I talked to her on the phone. Of course I took the tortoise, right?
Of course you did.
So my son and I went over there, picked him up. It's 150 pounds. He has a hammock. It takes 2 people to lift him, you know, in and out of a car or whatever. But I started thinking about it, like that's the hourglass reminding me of it. So in my mind, it's not an hourglass, it's a tortoise. The tortoise just, you know, they live forever. This tortoise is going to outlive me if I don't bump it off. So I sort of think about it like the tortoise. So just the goal is to have a long life, but I think I'm going to switch over to the hourglass.
The hourglass thing is just more sand because you see the sand running out, and it's like, no.
So the other thing we treat, so there are the, you know, brain tumors in the solid part of the brain or spinal cord, but there's this whole other part of that, the central nervous system, which is the fluid space. And so increasingly, as we're doing a better job as a community taking care of melanoma, breast, lung cancer, patients are living longer, the primary tumor is contained, cells will kind of slip out and go through the bloodstream and they'll get into the fluid. And these patients, the glioblastoma is bad, these patients die in 4 to 6 weeks from diagnosis with no treatment, and with treatment, and there's nothing approved, it's 2 to 4 months maybe. So, and this is 10 times the number, this affects 10 times the number of patients in the US, at least, than glioblastoma. So glioblastoma, 15,000, it's 150,000 patients. It's probably 2 to 4 times underdiagnosed because people die with it and don't even know they have it. So we have a different way to deliver the same drug. We put it into the fluid, but glioblastoma patients also get the fluid space seeded with cancer cells. So it's another way to come at the disease with a targeted radiotherapeutic that's not sort of specific to the primary GBM, but it affects 10 times the number of patients with GBM, and it's even deadlier. Wow. There's just all these sort of needs in the CNS cancer space.
Well, it's like, you know, when you buy a red car, all you see is red cars, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, since we've been doing a lot of, you know, getting behind GBM research and everything, it's like, we see it more and more. It's just more and more. And it's like, is the rates of people getting GBM? Is it going up? It feels like it's going up. Again, if you have a red car, you see red cars.
Yeah.
We're in GBM. I feel like it's more and more prevalent than it's ever been. Are cases going up?
We work with, I just hired the kind of the lead neuropathologist from MD Anderson who works for us now, who's helping.
You couldn't get a better place.
It's a great place. And he is, yes, he's great. And he just retired, he's working for us full time, helping us get this test off the ground. I'll ask him and I'll follow up. I don't think it is. I think it's pretty flat.
Wow.
It might be a slight uptick. I haven't heard, definitively that it's going up, but it's one of those diseases that just by the numbers, gosh, it's super rare, but everybody knows somebody that's had it because it's so devastating and it's so quick, it's so obvious.
It's John McCain, it's Bo Biden, it's Edward Kennedy, it's all these public figures that you just watch, and it's rough. I remember Tim Shriver, it was Ed Kennedy's, it's his nephew. And he heard that he took a turn for the worse. And I said, he'll be fine. And I didn't know. I didn't know what the diagnosis was. I go, I just want to encourage you. He's going to be okay. And so Tim did this event with me in Washington.
Who was that? I'm not Tim.
Tim Shriver.
Yeah.
He runs Special Olympics International.
Okay.
His mom, Eunice Kennedy Shriver.
Oh, yeah. So the Kennedy family.
Yes, the Kennedy family.
Yeah.
So,
I know.
And so he introduced me for this thing I was doing in Washington. And he said, Scott told me that my uncle was going to be okay. And he didn't last very long. And he goes, I had to process that because I really wanted to trust him when he said he was going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I was like, I didn't know. In that moment, I was just like, oh, I just feel it so badly. I tried to encourage him, but it was false hope. Mm-hmm. But he said, in thinking about everything, he got a victory lap that he never would have had had it not been for the fact that he knew he was going to die. Mm-hmm. And so he wrote a book, and he did things, again, that living your life intentionally, knowing that it's finite. And he said, and in that, he goes, I can now say that Scott was right. He was okay. And it's respecting, just somebody's journey, but it's also more sand. Whatever you can do. Yeah. Whatever you can do to extend life and allow people to have more memories and create more memories for the loved ones. It's so important, and we all should be able to live a full life. I have a friend in LA, and he's 93, and he's the youngest 93-year-old I've ever seen. He's younger than me, and I'm 65.
It's inspirational when you see guys, women in their 90s, and they're more active than you. It's like, oh my gosh, okay, maybe
great.
I don't.
But wouldn't that be great if we all got that?
Yeah.
And it's like research, and it's new modalities of treatment, and it's innovation, and it's all these things that just give you hope that, man, I get to get really old. Wouldn't that be something? It's the hope in that. It's like, yes, I want to be a burden to my children.
Having a grandkids, really, I just had I think I told you, just had the first one, but I knew that, and I've sort of anticipated it's great. You can intellectually know it's great, but that's a really important milestone. And to the point you're like, maybe I can live when she has. You just think about, wow, when you talk about sand, that really operationalizes that. Yeah. Grandkid really is a very significant milestone.
I always joke that I saw a bumper sticker once that said, if I had known grandchildren were this much fun, I would have had them first, And I was kind of so old when I had my first child. It's like, I kind of did that. So, but I want to see my children have children.
You're going to have,
And it's
you're going to have
just,
a bunch.
The idea of that is just so.
It's incredible.
Yeah, so let's fight for that.
Yeah.
Together.
Yeah.
We fight.